Today we're going to be disassembling a Sig P6/P225. We're going to make sure the gun's unloaded. We've already removed the magazine. We're going to lock our slide back with the slide stop lever. And of course, always keep this pointed in a safe direction. We have nothing in the chamber there. At this point, we're going to rotate the takedown lever 90 degrees south. We're going to release our slide and separate it from the frame. With our slide removed, we're going to decock the hammer. We're going to remove the takedown lever. It protrudes a little bit out the other side of the frame there, so take your index pointer finger and push as you rotate counterclockwise with the lever, and it's spring loaded, so it'll kind of pop out there. And just keep rotating counterclockwise as you pull out. Next, we're going to remove the breech block, this piece here. That you're going to slide up at a slight angle and then pull forward, and that rides on two rails there. And as you can see, there's the takedown lever spring. At that point, we'll remove the grip screws, which I've kind of already loosened. At this point, we're going to remove the trigger bar spring, which is stuck underneath the detent here and is held in place on the trigger bar, and then this hole in the frame here holds a looped part of the spring. We'll just take the spring and pull down on that and remove the trigger bar spring. At this point, we'll remove the trigger bar and trigger pivot pin. That should just push through to the other side of the frame. And as you can see, that also holds the slide takedown lever in place. And at that point, you can just remove that easily. We're now going to take the trigger and tilt that somewhat up at an angle there. At the same time, down here, you're going to want to put some pressure and just kind of work it down there. You'll feel it's kind of got a point where it just kind of gives and snaps right out of place there. Now we have the trigger bar and trigger. At this point now, we're going to remove the decock spring assembly. Take a small little screwdriver, put your thumb over top of the spring, give it a little pry up, it'll snap right on out. Rotate it clockwise, and it'll slip right out of the slot there. At that point, the decock lever is ready to pop right off. The bushing in the back here, sometimes that'll stick in there, sometimes it won't. Obviously you saw it slip out of there. Next is going to be our hammer spring assembly. Next we're going to remove our hammer spring assembly. What I'll do there is I'll put my thumb underneath the mag well and my fingers on top of it there. Give it a slight little push up and it'll pop right on out there. Be careful, it's under some pretty good pressure on the P6s especially. At this point, we're going to remove the sear safety lever. That spring there, we're just going to release the pressure there, and you'll see that relieves the pressure. We push the sear pin out, and you'll see that this is all going to come loose here in about 2 seconds. So safely, we'll kind of pull that out. A good idea at points like this is to maybe use a freezer bag so you don't lose any of the parts, so you don't go flying off on you. Move the sear spring. The sear and the safety lever now usually just kind of slide right on out of there. We got those two pieces there, and as you can see, that hole lines up with that hole, and this L-shaped bracket sits underneath your sear there. And we'll go over that more when we reassemble. Now we're going to remove the hammer. Same thing, pin just pushes out. Hammer's going to slide down and forward, up and out. And the mag release button. There's a small little pin in here. This is where your freezer bag's going to come in handy because you're going to lose this little guy. It's going to shoot out on you. You got to push in on it, and it'll usually release itself under its own pressure. There's two springs there and a pin. We have the spring in the back, and then this pin, as you can see, has to go one way. That little nipple has to be pointing down. There's a small spring that sits inside there. Those are the two parts that if you're not careful, those will go shooting off on you. And that's about $10 worth of parts you're going to have to buy and wait to get. Right there we have a bare frame. Next, we're going to move on to our slide. Push the recoil rod forward. Recoil rod and spring come out. Barrel up and forward. That comes out. Now we have the breech block and roll pins that hold that in place. I have a piece of hard cutting board table. I drill a hole in it, line up the hole with the roll pin here. Couple of good taps, that'll come right on out. We have our roll pin. Breech block will just kind of slip out of there. There's also pins in there, or springs in there, I'm sorry. You have the safety spring and the firing pin assembly. That's our breech block. All that's left now is to remove the sights. I have a sight pusher for that. If you need, you can use a vise and a piece of hardwood or a brass punch, brass hammer. Just be careful not to mark up the slides. And that's it. We're all done. When you see this gun next, it'll be reassembled and all refinished.